Okay, now we need to let people in.
Admit all.
Okay, shine the music. One more round. One more round.
Welcome, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the debut of Coffee Talk and Archival Talk.
An archivist talk, yeah.
I just woke up, people. I'm going to be honest. This is the debut of our first show. So please give us grace today. But thank you for joining us. And we're going to let a few more people come in the room. Is that okay, Michelle?
Yeah, that's good.
And if you can just type in the chat where you're from, how you feeling, whatever you want to put in the chat, please let us know. We would like to know your temperament this morning. Good morning, Mariah. Hopefully I said that right.
Morning to Phoenix and Hollis and Barry.
Oh my God, somebody's in Michigan. I know it's cold. Oh, Mariah. Oh, that's so cool. You see how she did that? That's so good. Thank you. Well, I hope you spelled my name correctly. So you told me how to pronounce your name. So. Oh, wow. Indiana. Okay. I'm going to give a weather report too. So. British Columbia. Nice. Appleton, Wisconsin.
Minneapolis.
Wow.
Most of you are in cold places.
Kentucky, California. Somebody told me about Lake Tahoe. I just want to tell the people who are in California, I may be coming to Lake Tahoe, just to let you know. Oh, Kalamazoo. I would love to live in a place called Kalamazoo. That's how my life sounds sometimes. Canada, representing. Thank you so much for joining us. I think you're the only one, if you're the only one that that you're from Canada. I'm a comedian, by the way, so please take what I say with a grain of salt and lightly. Yes, yes.
Here in Salt Lake City, it is 32 degrees, but it is sunny.
Okay, I guess we can get started. It's 10:05, so.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Speaker. Well.
Yeah, we have a couple of housekeeping things first. We just want to let everyone know. So there is going to be a Q&A chat discussion period for about 10 or 15 minutes at the end. So We invite you to put any questions, comments. Please blow up the chat. That will be great. We'd love to hear from all of you. This is a discussion, right? We're not talking at you. We'd love to have you participate. And Cassandra Berman, who's one of our steering committee members, is going to be moderating that. So we wanted to just recognize her and say thank you.
Good morning, Cassandra.
Good morning.
For being willing to moderate our discussion this morning. And then we are recording this session, and we're going to be able to post it on the SAA YouTube channel. So you'll be able to find the recording later, and we're hoping to have that whole series on the YouTube channel for SAA. So just as an FYI, we are recording this session. So did I get all the housekeeping stuff? I think that's everything.
Okay, ma'am. So, the weather, okay. It looks like everybody's kind of cold. I'm in Austin, Texas. It's 58 degrees this morning. It's very sunny. So I'm hoping it's sunny all over Texas. Hopefully you hear that little accent. I tried to push a little bit in there, a little bit of it. And in Utah, Salt Lake City, it's 32 degrees. So are you cold?
No, it's sunny. As long as the sun's shining, we're fine.
Okay. All right. Okay, so you have your weather report, people. Next time I may have some things where it's flipping around and all that kind of stuff, I don't know. But we have our housekeeping rules done. And as stated, this is the debut of our first video podcast for the steering committee, women's section, Society of American Archivists. And I'm happy to be here with Michelle today. So this is a comfortable space. Feel free to keep your cameras off, drink your coffee, whatever you're doing, have a good time. So I would say we're gonna go ahead and get into why we decided to do this all of a sudden, one morning, just having a conversation. And I guess I'll let you go, Michelle.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, I was trying to remember what kind of led to this idea before we started, but we got talking about how so much has changed and realizing that, everybody's talking about this new normal, how we can't really go back to what the old normal was. And we came up with the theme, leaning into change. Like there's just been a lot of change in all of our lives in the last couple of years. And obviously that's spilled over into the profession in some ways. So we just chose to do this because we wanted to, everything feels kind of heavy right now. Like we just wanted to have a space where people could come and just relax and drink coffee together and talk about archival things. So I just have my water, so.
Well, the coffee came because of me, because I'm a coffee drinker. And if you want to know what brand of coffee I'm drinking this morning, it's called Illy, ILLY, Illy. And you can put a C with it and kind of make it into chili. But you don't see anything? Oh, okay, that's Cassandra. Okay, I'll send it to you. But my coffee cup that I have this morning is in honor of our former Supreme Court Justice. I call her Lady Ruth. Like I'm in love with this coffee cup. I probably own like about maybe 100 coffee cups, and I'm serious when I say that. So you'll see one different, for the remainder of this season of the show. So for me, I think the reason why I wanted to be a part of this podcast is pretty much what Michelle said. I'm tired of Zoom meetings, which we're in a Zoom meeting right now, but you get the gist, hopefully, as it pertains to why we had to put it together this way as far as the techie stuff. But I think right now the climate is still thick. I would say that for me personally, as far as the pandemic and looking at starting a video podcast, coming into this, and the feeling that I have is that last year was very, very heavy. This year is very, very, very heavy, but it's like mental. Things are starting to change a little bit, but more of it's mental now. So I think that, why not talk about things, versus see and learn and show and tell all the time, if that makes sense, as adults. So hopefully we'll have some smiles. Hopefully we won't cry. Hopefully not. And just have some lively conversation about what's going on in the world, in our profession. So leaning into change, where did that come from, Michelle? It came from you, because it didn't come from me, in regards to our conversation. Like, what were you thinking about when you were thinking about leaning into change? Just about, I would say, just your being as a woman, as who you are.
Yeah, we had this conversation, and I think probably a lot of people are kind of getting on board with this idea of, instead of having New Year's resolutions, they pick a theme or a word to kind of guide what they want to do throughout the year. So for the last 3 or 4 years, I've had just a word that I've tried to use to kind of guide, my year and how I'm trying to live my life. And this year, my word is curate. So thinking about curating, happening to life instead of life happening to me, right? And I think for the last couple of years, life has kind of been happening to all of us, and we haven't had a lot of say or been able to do a whole lot about what's going on sort of generally. But I think for me this year, it was like, but there are small things that I can do to kind of get out of this slump with my own individual life, to try to kind of curate that so that I'm happening and I'm creating, the kind of life that I want. So that's kind of where and then, yeah, we were just talking about how that, having that word, having that theme, and being able to lean into kind of where we're at right now, and kind of trying to focus on what we can do to accept the change, to learn how to manage it, all that sort of thing. So,
well, when you told me about the word, I how excited I was. It's like, what? You live by a word once a year versus goals. And in that moment, I think like something like, snapped in my brain, which it needed to, because I think we're always trying to, like, first of all, how can you deal with goals in a pandemic anyway? Like, really, just seriously, how can you, like, because this is my first pandemic. I don't know about like my grandparents or my great grandparents. I think, just what happened in history was a pandemic, people. But just thinking about a pandemic and goals, and I had one friend who told me, well, I lost this, all of this weight, and I was like, how? What? That's what you were like? That's what you were thinking about, losing weight? Okay, but to each his own. So when you said the one word, I was like, okay, I think I can do this. So my word, everyone, is evolve.
I love it.
I know. I think it's appropriate for where I am in my life. I'll share a little bit with, everyone about me. I was a former African American community archivist and librarian at the Austin History Center. I took that position role in the summer of 2018. I'm no longer there. I resigned during the pandemic. How about that?
One of those.
Probably one of the best moves I've ever made in my life, in my 40s era. Yes, 40. Yeah, it looks as good. It does. But, and looking at that word evolve for myself, and staking a claim for my own life and saying that, I know there are other things that I want to do with myself outside of, I would say, for me as an artist, being trapped in an institution, like my mind doesn't work in that way. So I want to thank you, honestly, for that moment that we had together, because I thought that was precious, because I've shared it with everyone that, instead of goals, why not use a word? And I know that may sound like, ABC to everybody here right now, but if you really think about it, what is your word? Like, I also went so far as to start the whole new year February 1st. I no longer celebrate the new year on January 1st because so much die, it's just too much things die, and like, there are no flowers out. So why are we, it's a lot going on. So, for me, February 1st makes sense. And this is all during the pandemic, us making these, decisions for our lives. So I'm going to tell the audience right now, whatever you're doing, instead of, utilizing goals, how about a word?
Or
You can put that,
phrase.
yeah, you can start that right now. And if you want to share it in the chat, you can. Okay? Like, that would be nice. Encourage your peers, encourage others to not put all of this weight on their backs. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, we have control over a little bit, I feel like, in how we're kind of creating the life we have for ourselves, and being able to lean into this change. I love what you talked about about deciding to step away from, resigning and stepping away and kind of being able to do your own thing, right? Because I love it. I was thinking the other day, like, I have made the choice. So I work at the LDS Church History Library in Salt Lake City. And so, but I've made that choice, right? So thinking about having to wake up in the morning and get up and get ready and go into the office and deal with whatever I have to deal with, like, fundamentally, the choice I've made, the way that I've kind of created and curated my life that way, is to be an employee there and to work there, and so that has, these other things that I end up having to do, right? So just remembering, like, as we're leaning into this change, as we're trying to kind of figure out a new normal for ourselves, like, there are some external factors, but like, we still have choices, I think, in our lives, but also in our jobs, in our careers, like how we are showing up for those, and how we're managing that as part of our bigger, life.
I would say, if someone, if you want to take a leap, if you want to do something different, I'm going to give you I'm telling you now, this is what my brain has been telling me, like, with the universe, the connection that I have. And by the way, if you're looking at my artwork, this is Ramir Bearden behind us, one of my favorite artists. But change, leaning into change. Time doesn't wait for anyone. So I'm not a therapist, but I will tell you that time does not wait on anyone. So if there's something that you want to do today, do it. Like, why not? I think that's what this pandemic has taught me. And I'm a free-spirited person. Like, I think you know that by our conversations, that, there's no end to the sky. So if there's no end to the sky, then, hey, and I'm going to be frank with everyone, like, that was not an easy decision, but I refuse to live my life unhappy. Like, I have watched a lot of things take place that I never thought would happen in my own life, which I'm quite sure you have. And we're on two different parts. You're in Utah, I'm in Texas. I'm quite sure you've seen what's taken place in Texas over these past 3 years. And to think, we still had to boil water this year. Are you serious? Like, y'all still haven't gotten it right? So if they haven't gotten it right, then somebody, at least I can do something for myself. So mentally, like I said, the way we started this off, it's heavy in the air now. So how do you change those things? Even in our profession, so for me, that was it was just an important move on the chessboard, first of all, and then just honoring who I am as an entrepreneur, because I've always been that. And that's not to say that I can't still work with all these archivists that are here right now. It's just saying that I'm doing it my way. So let me be your guide if you need one, yeah.
And and again, like, I'm also not a therapist, but I think, something that you did, Kim, was like, you did this big thing for yourself. Like, you took the time, thought about it, and made this really big shift, right? I think some of the hardest parts about, curating or leaning into change is those like daily sort of consistent steps, right? Because let's be honest, most of us can't just be like, I'm going to quit my job today, right? And we've got bills to pay, we need insurance, whatever, right? But but there are those little sort of consistent daily things that we can do to work towards those goals. And we're not using goals, but to work towards fulfilling that sort of word or phrase that we're working on, right? So just thinking about and that's not sexy, right? Having to think about like these little steps that you take every day, and having that consistency, because that's not always fun to have to think about doing those things every day, right? When you don't see results immediately the way that you would if you make a big shift. But that's definitely something, as thinking about leaning into change and kind of creating this new normal for myself. I've recognized that it's those daily sort of little things that I do that help me shift and lean into that change instead of making really big changes as well.
I know, because I saw you this morning. Everybody, she was putting on her makeup. Like, I felt like we were like, we are stars. I want everyone to know that you're a rock star. I believe everybody is a rock star that's in a room with me. I don't care if it's virtual, physical, we're all rock stars, but you got to believe that about yourself. Okay. But anyway, I'm not a therapist. Okay. I'm not. But I mean, just to see you putting her makeup on this morning, I was just like, look at Michelle. She's alive. She's, like, where has that been for everyone? Like, you remember how people, I don't know if you remember, but I used to see people driving in traffic in Texas, putting on eyeliner. Like, how are you driving your car, putting on, like, and so now you have time to put the eyeliner on, but then again, you don't have time sometimes. And just to see you doing that and knowing that, you are a wife, you are a mother, you work full time. I don't even know how to explain to everybody, but just to see Michelle doing that, it was just a beautiful moment. And it was just like, it's so cute. Oh my God. Like, what happened? Though we're missing those moments, like putting on clothes, makeup. Like this morning, all I had to do was just moisturize my face really well, put my Ray-Bans on. What's up? How you doing? Versus, me having a meeting, 5 meetings in one day, in the physical, and you got like it's a lot going on. So I don't know. I'm appreciating some of these moments. And when you say leaning into change, I'm leaning into that in regards to just being okay with just having a t-shirt on that says, I am an entrepreneur, with some shorts and some Uggs, and life is good. Okay? Like, and still bringing in the coins, people. You still got to bring in the coins. You do. So I guess we can shift.
Yeah.
The conversation. And we had this idea. I mean, we had a lot of ideas when we first thought about this. And we thought about a time capsule, a digital time capsule, where everyone who comes to our show can drop something off. Okay. So hold on really quickly. I'm going to leave and then we'll come right back so I can make sure you get this link really quick for our digital time capsule.
So, and part of our time capsule, while she's finding that and dropping that in the chat, like, we really wanted to, thinking about leaning into change, thinking about words, thinking about how we're kind of trying to meet our goals, specifically as archivists, like, how are we leaning into that change? where are we, what direction are we going? Where do we see ourselves in 5 or 10 years, right? And so this is, kind of a place where you can drop in like what your dreams are, what your goals are, even just what your words are that we were just discussing. Ways that you feel like you're being able to show up. Like the time capsule is really just a place that we want to have for a space for everyone to just talk about some of these things with leaning into change and how you're doing that. It's, part inspiration for the rest of us and like maybe part motivation for some of us to be able to see all of those great things and get some ideas and know what we can do. So Kim just dropped that link in the chat. So please take some time to go and look at it and
You
join
like
us.
Phoenix said she likes it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I actually had like things flowing around, but with Google Forms, you can't put up like an MP4. So if you want the cover where things are moving, like I actually have a time capsule moving and a coffee cup moving, I will send that to you because I'm really proud of what I created.
Yeah.
Okay. But please, if you want to right now, because I'm gonna put something in there today, drop a message in there to your future self. And Michelle, I forgot to tell you this. I did put a disclaimer on there that we're gonna create a Zine with all of these messages for annual. And please, when you read the time capsule, all entries are anonymous. We do not collect personal information. We just want your message. Now, just think about, we're collecting like over 100 messages from archivists. I can't wait to see. Like, I just want to see them moving or something. Like, I just think that would be really cool to see, to see where we all are. Because again, this is all mental, what we're going through now. And we're not therapists. I think that needs to be like our next like little mantra or clause. We're not therapists.
We're not therapists.
But we are archivists. This is the debut, people. So, it comes and it goes. But hopefully you can see also that in thinking about a time capsule, thinking about that message to yourself, that your future self, I put 2030. Okay. So I think that's a little while to think about, some things you might want to change, or, you may want to resign like me. Join me.
And please feel free, like this isn't just a one-time entry either, I don't think. Will they put more than one?
Oh
Yeah.
no, I said it I'll change it.
Okay.
To where they can put more than one response. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Because I think, put something in there today, but then if you think of something else, like come back and put more in there. Like, I would really love, I think we both would really love to just build this as just a really great space for people to share, messages to their future selves that can inspire other people as well.
I'm just shocked we're doing a video podcast. This is like amazing, people. And this is me, like this is my element. I like, being around people, but though we can't, in person right now, I still like being around people. And I think in meeting you, and just learning about you in each meeting, as far as my professional time capsule, I'd say I'm very pleased to be developing a relationship with someone outside of my own race. What? Who is cool? Yes.
Thank you.
Who has good conversation? Amen. And, we vibe, yeah, we do.
And that's something people probably can tell, but like you are very outgoing and like, let's talk about all these great things. This is so great. And I feel like I'm just kind of sitting here smiling and being like, yes, and carrying the conversation, right? So it just shows like just the differences but being able to come together and yeah, develop those relationships. And yeah, I've just loved being able to talk about some of these things. And you're always sharing quotes with me and inspiration and I just have loved developing this relationship as we've started working towards this podcast. And I feel like this honestly was never on my radar to do something like this, right? Like, so this is a new experience for me, and as like this introvert, it has been really a little bit scary to think about doing this and having everybody see what's going on. But I want to thank you, because I feel like you've made it a comfortable thing, right? Where it's like, I know that I can carry on a good conversation with you.
That's
And I know
Southern
that you're
love.
excited. Yeah. And I know that you're
Southern love. I'm a Southern belle, and you're a what part of the world is that? The East Coast? Do y'all consider Utah the East Coast?
no,
Or what?
Utah's Mountain West.
Oh, help me, Mountain West. So we have one more hot topic, okay, people, that we're gonna really get into. But there's a question in the chat. What are you doing now that you quit your job? I resigned. I didn't quit. It's a different word, people. Quitting is, now I wish I could have quit. Let's get this straight. If I could have, but I still got to have that last name of Keaton, so I can get business. No, you're good. You're good. I just, it's a difference though, seriously. But what am I doing this podcast this morning? I'm a PhD student at the University of North Texas. Mean green all day. Yes, mean green. Eagles, we fly, we soar. No, I'm not at UT Austin. I am not a part of Shadow. No, I'm not. So what am I doing? I'm an entrepreneur. I am the founder of Art Library Deco, which is distributed through Novella Media LLC. So I, walked away. I've been doing what I've been doing. I just am doing it now full time. I'm getting my PhD in information science, interdisciplinary studies. My research has to do with what we're about to go into now.
I was going to say, this is a perfect segue.
African American Community Archives. So if you want to know more about my body of work, I will put it here, the chat for you. BGLAM, Black Galleries, Libraries, Archives, Museums. Feel free to take that survey if you can. It is IRB approved. What is the difference between, Cassandra asked me, what's the difference between resigning and quitting? Quitting,
I don't know.
Well, Texas is an at-will state. So you can get up and you can walk out if you want to, and you don't have to tell anyone anything, and leave your computer on and coffee sitting there. Resigning is when you do it the proper way. You tell the community goodbye.
Okay.
You tell everybody goodbye, and then you leave the next morning, or however you negotiated that. And I negotiated I wanted an extra week there, because remember, my title was African American Community Archivist and Librarian. So I had a twofold position, and I wanted to tell the community bye, because guess who employs me still? Still got to have that last name. The same people.
Still working with the same community.
Bling, 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 coins all day. But that's because of that last name and establishing, what I needed to establish in coming to the city. But no, I wouldn't. Well, in my 20s, I probably would have quit. It would have been a show that, you probably would have heard about it, Michelle. But now at 45, no, honey, we have to, there's a difference. So I hope everyone understands that quitting and resigning in the state of Texas are different. I live in an at-will state. So they could have fired me if they wanted to and been like, we need you to pack your things up and let's walk you out. But I beat them to the punch.
Yeah.
Not that they were going to do that, but you got to foresee things in life, people. Your future, what we're talking about, that time capsule. For me, I can't speak for anyone else, nor can I tell you how to do that. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a therapist. But okay, so.
But yeah, let's segue. So we had a second topic we wanted to do about kind of what is an archive, and Kim wanted to talk a little bit about her PhD and talk about African American community archives as well. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. It's this really great article that she and I have kind of been, discussing back and forth for a few months now, that actually showed up on the American History Association website. It's part of their blog. Hold on, let me just get this really quick. Copy. And so this is their perspectives blog, and feel free to read it. But it's really great. It's called Stop, Please Quit. Hold on, I got it printed here. Please stop calling. Yeah, please stop calling things archives. And it's a really great thing. It's, an archivist's plea. He's reaching out to the historic community in this article, discussing that, historians like to use the word archive. They kind of throw it around in an offhanded way, which maybe is a little bit disrespectful to the work that we do. And it talks a little bit about how we can, how historians can be better about using the word archive and talking about what those really are. So I'm going to throw the question out to you, Kim, like what is your definition of an archive? And especially right now, as we're talking about change and things have maybe changed, like what do you consider an archive? What is, and then you can narrow it down about African American community archives. So go.
What is an archive? So I went through this process. Now, if you go to beglam.blog, you'll see the survey. It's already out there. The questions that I came up with for my dissertation. So when you shared this with me, now I did read this. I haven't read it twice, but I need to read it again. I was like, have I done this wrong? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're thinking about what is an archive. And so I went to my mentor team who is outside of the institution, outside of the university. And I met with Dr. JN, we're just going to say Dr. JN. And I'm asking her, what does she think an archive is? And she's African American. And she said, well, I don't believe I'm an archive. I said, did you just say that you as a human being don't believe that you're an archive? So then, okay, the brain starts to move.
Yeah.
It started to move. And so I was like, okay, should I be asking people what is an archive in my survey? Or should I be asking them what is a community archive? Or what is an African American community archive? All these questions just started coming up. So then we started having this conversation quickly. And I got to the point where I was like, well, you know what? We got to go back to history in this, because as slaves, our ancestors, my ancestors, I get to go see them, 2 people this summer. We'll talk about it later. But they, if you know history, let's just move fast forward to the Middle Passage. They get to the Carolinas. All these things happen. The way my demographic, culture, people have always interpreted, talked about, discussed is through oral history. So it's just interesting for me to hear her say she's not an archive. So I went so far as to say, you don't believe that you're a human archive? Well, you got to be challenged. Well, what if I never shared that history? Well, you're still a human archive. You just die with the history. I know that sounds kind of blunt, but I am a blunt person. Okay, but that's just what it is. However, everyone on this call right now is a human archive. Okay, so when I look at this question now, I go further than me opening up a drawer. I go further than me going to find a folder. Let's break it down. Going to find an image, going to, maybe we should just start saying what we're going to go find versus us saying, because I think people do look at at differently. And I think where the conversation went, which I think is startling, and I'm continuing to think about this, is once we got past the human archive, because she did agree. And if you don't agree with that, please put that in the chat that you're not a human archive. Because then I would say you're not alive and why are you here? I'm serious and I'm not trying to be funny, but like, why are you here? Because I know someone told you about your history. And if they didn't, I can help you with genealogy. Please contact me. Okay, we'll get you right. But now, moving past human archive, okay, so if you can answer that question, we can have this conversation. You have a PhD though. Okay, so we can talk about, well, some of them can talk about everything, but the average human being that we work with independently, however you want to talk about it, you ask them a question of what is an archive? Tell me, I would like to know, I would like to see people's hands raised. I just want you to tell me how many people on here do you think would just be able to answer that question as to what is an archive? If you ask them what a legacy is, that's a different question. What is your legacy? What is a legacy? But what is an archive? I think we would get a proper answer from our field, from the librarian field, from the information technology field. But as it pertains to just walking up to people in Kroger's or Randall's, what's the name of a grocery store in Salt Lake City?
I don't know, Macy's.
Macy's. Well, they spend money there.
It's within E.
Oh, well, okay. So Macy's, I have to check them out. What is an archive? I think, and I think it would take people a moment to gather themselves. And then you go to the next question. What is a community archive? How many people will place themselves in that archive? How many people will place their families in that archive? So that's where I'm going with my research, people. If you think I'm confused now, I don't know. Do you think I'm confused, Michelle? I don't think I'm confused, but
No. Tell me, you said that you're sending out a survey for your research. Like, who does this survey go to?
who does it go to?
Yeah. Just like everybody?
When
Like,
you
you
say,
just-
yeah, oh yeah, it's real, people. Yes. So this is real. This is the dissertation coming. Like I'll be in my third year in the fall. That's it. Coursework done. Time to write. So beglam.blog. I'll put it in the chat again. Just click on research and you'll see the survey link. And
Awesome.
feel free to check it out. Now, what we discussed about, what is an archive, those are two new questions that I'm going to talk with my co-chairs about. What is an archive? What is a community archive? Those are the two next questions that I want to ask I'm only going to have two surveys in this next survey, the final survey, because I think it's looking at some of the answers, I believe people, but I think that when people take surveys, first of all, you just run through them. Are you really reading? So I really want to get to the gist of my question.
Right.
And I think that's fair to me, so I can write a great dissertation and be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'll throw it on you real quickly. We have 1 minute before we shift to the audience. What is an archive, Michelle?
When you were talking about that, I was like, thinking about what an archive is, like, I think that's a complex question, right? And like you say, when you go out to regular people and say, what is an archive? I think a lot of people will look at you and be like, what are you even asking me? Like, I've never heard that word before, right? I know that, like, when I tell people I'm an archivist, they're like, what is that? Like, what do you do? But I feel like my definition of an archive has actually expanded a lot. Mostly like being part of SAA and hearing about the work of what other people are doing. Like, I hear about what work you're doing, right? And working with African American community archives, and like thinking about a community archive, like that wouldn't have crossed my mind, right? Like, you think the word archive, I think you think of like this stuffy building with like a lot of old things that nobody has access to. Like, it's just, that's what an archive is to people. But I really love this shifting, sort of expanding idea that an archive, can be in the community. It can be inside a human being, and yeah, like you still have those places with all the locked up records or whatever, but I think the idea of an archive is accessibility, right? It's accessibility to our history. And it's like you said, being a human archive, like if you never share that history, well, that, it's gone, right? And so I think, like, as an archive is a place to access our history. So that would be my definition.
So we brought you some hot topics. We're not The View. We are coffee and archival talk people, okay? So we are now going to shift it to the crowd. We are so thankful that you joined us today, that you took time out to just hear some things that were on our minds. And now we want to see what's on your mind. So if you'd like to turn on your screens, you can. If you want to put a question in the chat, Cassandra is going to moderate our show, the remainder of, and you'll get to listen to that jazz that I found at 4 o'clock this morning. Okay, people. That is royalty free on Pixabay. Okay. All right. Okay, so
Y'all gotta talk.
yeah, you gotta say something.
Like, all y'all gotta say
Like
something.
y'all cannot be shy. Y'all are here with us. But if you want us to continue to talk, I can, honey. I can do that. Thank you for turning on your camera, Phoenix. It's nice to see you.
I just have to say that this morning on like historian Twitter, there was a similar question about what is an archive. Actually, it was an English professor, I think, complaining about people using the term archive as a stand-in for text. So entering in from a different perspective. And then, people came in who had more of like a linguist approach, and they sort of took it back to, well, archive literally means sort of an archive is a government sort of institution, and so sort of tracing back the etymology of the word. So I think there are so many different ways that you can approach this, but I just think it's interesting that I don't know if that was in response to, or part of a conversation generated by this article, or if these things just are things that pop up every once in a while and people start discussing it again. But it seems as though it's a term that's important outside of our field as well. So it means a lot to a lot of people. So because I was just interested that there were these intersections, and it looks like we've got some people chiming in. Let's see. So Phoenix asks, what are some of your favorite advocacy awareness tools to teach people about archives? And I guess we could throw that at everybody.
I think for myself, or if we have anybody, do we have anybody in the audience that wants to answer that question? Please tell us where you're from.
I can. This is Norlene. I'm from Indianapolis. I think one of the biggest advocacy things, I think, is just getting out there and telling those stories that we have in our collections. For so much of what we do, it's such a personal connection that people have. And for them to understand what we're doing is telling those stories. I work for Kappa Alpha Theta Women's Fraternity at their headquarters. So telling our stories is how, these members have their stories, their own, experiences, and connecting them to the larger world of the organization and what it's meant, then helps to them explain. And then you can add that in about what the archives does. And it's not just for, quote, the cool stuff, it's also to support policy and all kinds of other things. But it's that lead in that gets them a sense of what you do and what you have and why an archives is important.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that, so, I'm a part of this archive that's like a global church, and so many people are just like, and for so many years, right? As an archive, we are a corporate archive. And so it's like, oh, you guys are hiding everything, right? And so there's been like this, we just actually created a brand new like just specifically like outreach division in our department to be like, okay, we're going to go out and have these conversations, and a couple of these people literally like go to different units like in the church and have these like conversations with people. They invite people to come so they can talk to them about our church history and how they can access the records, and like it's like opening up, people are starting to recognize what's available. So, and I love your background. That's like perfect.
Yeah. I was asking Michelle, but I think I like your background, Michelle. It gives you that mystique, that, like what is going on in that world over there?
There's a triple bunk behind me.
I kind of can tell. You shouldn't have told us that. Now
Sorry.
Yeah. Let me see. There was another good question in the chat. In preserving history and the ever-changing things, how are we going to look towards things like the United States 250th anniversary? I think for myself, in answering that question, I'm not going to be looking at the United States per se. I'm going to be looking at the region that I'm in and how they're viewing that. I have a lot to say about that question. So I'm just going to say that for the state capital in which I live right now, presently, Austin, Texas, as if there are not other state capitals. I'm sorry. We're going to be looking at the 1928 master plan, which is what divided Austin and why it is the way it is today. A freeway, I-35, and a document changed the course of history. And today, Austin, I got here summer 2018, it was probably 7% African-American. Black people built the state capitol. Today, it's probably like, I would say 4% African-American, and that is only professionals, which I'm a part of that group. So we have these positions, but what's going on? What's really going on? So that's what I'm more interested in when I'm looking at that question. I'm not really looking at the United States, because come on, people, it's been 3 years and we're still talking about the same things. So I think we need to take it to another level, to the local level. That's just me. I'm not a therapist.
I love that though. I think, right, it's and I love this idea that, like with your PhD talking about community archives, right? And talking about community. And I think we always talk about some of these big picture things, but it really is like those local, smaller sort of things. We've been working closely with a group here in Utah called Better Days 2020, and it's all about like women receiving the vote. And so we've been helping to do exhibits and talking about kind of women receiving the vote, which was this huge sort of national thing, but like really bringing it into this like local, here's how it happened in Utah. We technically take credit for like the first women voting in like 1871. Oh, I can't remember.
The state of Utah?
Yes. So it was kind of on this technicality though, because Wyoming actually passed the law first. So they gave the right to women to vote first.
Wow.
But Utah actually had an election first. So women in Utah actually were the first to vote in the country.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. Thinking about history, it makes sense.
But yeah, so it's taking it, I mean, so we're excited to claim about, first women voters, but, later it was taken away, but it's really great to like bring it down to that local level, because I think that's what people connect with, is seeing that local history, right?
Yeah, and I'm the arts commissioner for District 1 in the state capitol. So I now have a more political role, which my position was very political too, which I never thought it would have been, but we're in Austin, Texas, people. Like, I don't even want to go into that. But as far as being the arts commissioner, I just think it's important, you know, and looking at that question, when are we going to get back to the local people? Why are we so, you know, involved in, and not that we shouldn't be involved in national politics, global politics, but like, do you know who your neighbor is? That's what community archives are about. Do you know who so-and-so is 4 houses down? You know, like that's what community archives is about. Do you know what the word communal history means? That's what community archives is about. Do you know what legacy means? You know, what is your belief? What are your values? What are your ethics as it pertains to all of this? So,
It's a lot to think about.
yeah, I'm very interested in reparative. Did I say that right? Description. Okay, Phoenix, could you explain that? I don't know what that means.
Or Cassandra, explain what you're doing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually was responding to Cassandra, so I would like to
Oh.
defer to.
Oh, sure. Well, I was just thinking, you know, I think it was you, Phoenix, who asked about tools. And I was just thinking, you know, tools can be, you know, a variety of things, and this is just sort of a descriptive tool. And I'm reprocessing one particular collection at my institution, and it pertains to the relationship between the university I'm at and the history of the slave trade and slave ownership and slave labor. You know, this is just, it's kind of an interesting question thinking about, we're not like actively acquiring more materials. That's not what this project is about. It's about doing so much more with what we already have. And the SAA has been discussing reparative archival description a lot. And they had a really good, sort of really basic article in there. What is it? The Perspectives, which is the more kind of fun magazine rather than the journal. This was several months ago, but it gave like examples of what institutions, very like basic examples of what institutions were doing when they implement reparative archival description. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, sort of, I take it to mean sort of describing the materials that you have in a much more sort of holistic and equitable manner. One very basic description could be, like, I think the author was somebody at Princeton, and a collection they had was described as, you know, it was a collection of some man and some papers belonging to his wife. Turns out his wife was a very sort of well-regarded successful photographer, right? And a lot of the collection was actually the materials that she had created. Now, the description available that people would access online, you could, you know, even if you don't know anything about archives, you can Google this, you know, the man, I guess, and get his name, and you would know nothing about the wife, right? And it was really her materials that were so pertinent there. And that's a pretty easy fix. Like, a lot of the stuff that we do in archives take a long time, and, you know, depending on how many collections you have like that, that can take quite a while to fix. But they just showed sort of what they did to fix that description, that basic description. And it's naming people. So in the collection that I'm working on, we're trying to name as many enslaved people as we can that are represented. And it might be fragmentary, right? It might be a first name. It might be spelled many different ways in different places, but names are important, right? And so sort of creating as many sort of access points to description as possible, and then really drawing out different aspects of the history that's represented. So I've just been thinking a lot. I know reparative work has been, you know, talked about a lot recently, and there's some really great sort of guiding documents that are available that working groups have put out for people who are interested in. But I was thinking about sort of, you know, a lot of institutions are, you know, obviously constantly strapped for cash. We might not be actively acquiring more materials, depending on what type of community archivists seem to be always, that's what they do, right, is they acquire more materials. But some places it's maybe not within sort of our wheelhouse to do that, but doing more with what you, sort of taking it back, sort of reparative work is doing a lot more with what you already have and fixing mistakes of the past, and also admitting that you may not be correcting things fully now, right? So one of the things that we're trying to do too is invite feedback. Like if we're not using the right terms, if you find harmful language in what we're doing, if whatever, we don't want to put the onus necessarily on other people, but we want them to feel empowered to come to us and tell us what we're doing wrong. So, you know, as Michelle was talking about, kind of like setting a word or an intention or something, I like the idea of kind of, I can't boil it down to a single word, but, or maybe reparative work, right? Like doing more with what you've already got is kind of helpful to me. kind of rambling, but I've been thinking about that. So
Thank you so much for that definition. I was thinking that it came from reparations when I saw the word. So
it's related,
when it
definitely.
derived,
Yeah.
that's why I was like, it had to derive from that in some type of
For
way.
sure.
But okay, people, I'm all about time. It's 11:01. It is time for us to go do what we do best on Fridays, and that is be our best selves. Hopefully. Okay, hopefully. So what I will do is tell Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank
This was
you.
like amazing, the first show. Cassandra, you're amazing. With
There
our
was-
techie.
I just have to say there was an offer in chat. I don't want this to go overlooked about a theme, a composed theme. So from I just don't want to forget about this. And they said to contact them, Hollis Whitman. So thank you. We will maybe get in touch with you
would be
because that sounds
awesome.
really fascinating.
That was me. My husband is a composer, and he likes to do little jingles like this. So I thought if you wanted your own, your very own theme, we could do that.
That would be awesome.
Okay.
I mean, I'm volunteering him, but
Okay.
That's great. So thank you so much for coming and joining us, and be on the lookout. Same time next month, third Friday of every month, we're gonna have one of these. So thank you,
I'm
everyone.
gonna play the music to get us
Okay.
out of here. Hopefully.
Okay.
Hold on, let me get it up. We do need the jingle. Where is it? It's coming, people. It's coming. I'm sorry. It's coming. Where is it? Music. Okay, I got it.
You can hear it. We can't hear it.
Oh, you can hear it.
You gotta share your screen.
And I definitely have to give a shout out to my dog, Roxy Blue. She did not bark one time. Congratulations, Roxy. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you later.